Photography Daily.
The night I was in the emergency room, I met a real estate developer in Lake Tahoe. Literally, I'm at the ER.
Today, Mike Kelly on that meeting and how it led to a successful but entirely unplanned journey into the world of international architectural photography.
It was this $8 million insane vacation home with views for days, and I showed up and put together passable results.
It's a story of real left turns in life and being open to opportunity.
The lines are straight, the lighting is even, and she liked the photos enough to hire me back, and she paid me $200. And at the time, I was like, okay, that's more money than I've ever made.
We talk about what it takes to launch from scratch.
So I ended up going to LA. I knew basically nobody. Got down to Los Angeles and just started pounding the pavement. And 10 years later, here we are.
The show today is in two halves. The second takes another unexpected turn, but in the first, we discuss photographing property.
A lot of people see architectural photography as an outlet for a lot more creativity, for example, whereas real estate photography, you're just kind of Xeroxing, what's in front of you.
And whilst building that portfolio, Mike throws his first curveball.
I used to edit paparazzi photos 2 days a week, Friday night, Saturday night. I would literally be the guy at the computer editing the pictures, sending them off to The Sun, or whatever. Honestly, UK tabloids, you guys, you're the worst with your gossip.
Mike talks about choosing your genre.
I feel like I've designed the career for my personality. I don't want to say I'm heavily introverted, but I'm not, I'm not exactly like the partying type.
And then in the second half, he describes how a Canon 6D with the cheapest 50mm lens launched air portraits, born of his love for air travel.
Because it's impossible to visualize how incredible an airport is when you drive past it or when you just look at one plane at a time.
Mike's air portraits project took him literally on a journey around the world to make work from one initial picture recorded close to his home.
The internet got a hold of it. I got just shot out of a cannon levels of virality with that picture.
And we talk about Classified, a project made at one of NASA's bases.
I'm just going to start censoring random things in these pictures. And I think it makes it a lot more interesting.
Stories of life told by photographers. And today that photographer is Mike Kelly.
And some people say you can't sit around waiting for projects to hit you. But every great project I've had has struck me, and I've just acted on it on impulse, like the air portraits thing, or the still lives, or even Classified. I didn't know what I was doing until I took the photos, and then it all came together.
Patron of the day today is Ayet Wasserberger, and I'll leave a link to his Insta on the show page today. Travel, landscape and street. That's what floats his photographic boat, and just like our guest, I suspect you can't wait for the borders to open up again. I recognised a few of the places I've photographed in there, but there were and are many I haven't yet. A wonderful picture in particular of an Indonesian sunrise as the frame moves from deep greens to purples to the orange and strong reds of the sky. I'm guessing you're airline crew or something like that. You have to be. For the price of a fancy large latte per month, patrons are helping to build and keep this podcast as a 3-day-a-week full-length photography show. All patrons get to hear the extra Tuesday and Thursday shows. And after this, why not go listen to yesterday's show, which I'll link to, which for the first time we opened up to everyone, just for one day, so you can hear what goes on during those shows, called More. And yesterday's is one called Art, Nudes, and Tracy Emin Speaks to Me. Now, if that doesn't pique your curiosity, and we need a little feedback in that one too within the comments. Links on the show notes. We're proud too to be supported by MPB, the place to go if you want to buy, sell and trade quality used camera kit online in the US, Europe and the UK. And here's 2 reasons why you can trust MPB for your picture making. 1, peace of mind when you're buying in the form of a guarantee. And 2, money in your bank quickly when you sell. So if you want to buy, sell or trade used gear and be part of this ever-important circular economy, mpb.com is a great place to do business. So to today's guest, Mike Kelly. I like a story that twists and turns. Here's a photographer who one moment is sitting on a hospital ER bed nursing yet another broken part of his body, courtesy of his favourite extreme sport, when he gets chatting to somebody who's going to be pivotal in his life. Next thing, he's moved, changed his life to pursue successfully a career which takes him to the homes of the rich and famous in Bel-Air, Beverly Hills, the playgrounds of Mexico, Dubai, and well, let's just say his passport is well stamped, especially when it comes to the second part of today's story, and a chance playback of images on the back of an old Canon 6D. This is Mike Kelly. Mike, life took a different path for you because it might so easily have been Mike Kelly, professional snowboarder. I mean, you graduated, albeit at the peak of a recession in 2009 with a degree in art and one in environmental science. You changed direction, as I said. You went snowboarding, got right near the top, but then just as quickly stopped. Why?
What ended up happening was I hurt myself over and over and over. And on one of these injuries, I actually needed like 15 stitches in my forehead. And while I was recovering, actually, the night I was in the emergency room, I met a real estate developer in Lake Tahoe. Like literally, I'm at the ER, we're talking, and she's like, "What do you do for fun?" And yada yada. And I snowboard and I play guitar and I take pictures. And she's like, "You're a photographer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I own a camera. I wouldn't say I'm a photographer." And she says, "Can you take pictures of houses?" And I'm like, "Of course. How hard can that possibly be?" And so a couple of weeks later, she called me and she's like, "All right, I got a home for you up in the mountain." It was this $8 million, like insane vacation home with views for days. And I showed up and put together passable results. I think, I spent the week leading up to that trying to read as much as I could about architecture and real estate photography. This was 2010, which was like the sort of the peak of strobism, if I can say that, when people were using the little flashes everywhere. And it was really undergoing this revolution of, how to use off-camera flash. And people were discovering pocket wizards and putting lights in crazy places. And so that's what I did at first to get started. And I did a passable job. I look back and they're not terrible. They're not great, but the fundamentals are there. My composition is a little crazy, but the lines are straight. The lighting is even. And she liked the photos enough to hire me back, and she paid me $200. And at the time, like, I was like, okay, that's more money than I've ever made in a couple hours. And I, was just like, I'm going to just keep trying to do this. And as another year went by, I kept hurting myself more and more. I, was breaking knees and shoulders, and I had a meltdown about a year later. And I was like, I'm done with snowboarding. I'm just going to do this photography thing. And I pretty much flipped a coin. Not literally, but I was down to moving to San Francisco and moving to Los Angeles. I love San Francisco for its beauty, but I know that the art industry is really in Los Angeles. And so I ended up going to LA. I knew basically nobody. Got down to Los Angeles and just started pounding the pavement. And 10 years later, here we are.
Well, 10 years later, you've become a name in that industry. What's the glaring difference between architectural and real estate photography? Because there's obvious crossovers right at the start, but they're also different as well. Yeah,
there's a lot of similarity and a lot of difference. It's kind of like it's like a bass player and a guitar player. They both hold the same thing, but they do it totally differently. And real estate it's not meant to be not a long-term career, but a long-term, the photos don't need to last more than a few months. It's just, you get in, you get out, you take pictures. Here's what it looks like. You try to be quick, accurate, cheap, fast, because realtors, they're all working on commission. So they don't, or estate agents, I think you'd call them. They work on commission. They don't want to throw a lot of money out there up front to get, they don't want to spend thousands of dollars to market a property that's all they might make on it if it's a cheaper property. So you got to be quick. They might say, "Hey, I got a listing. It's going up tomorrow. I need photos tonight." And you're like, "All right, I'll be there." And the photos, they're just informational, right? And architecture, the timeline is a lot longer. The attention to detail has to be a lot higher. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. I think there's a lot of people see architectural photography as an outlet for a lot more creativity, for example, whereas real estate photography, you're just kind of Xeroxing, what's in front of you. But the photos that I take for an architect, we get one shot at them and they have to hold up for the rest of their career. So you really need to slow down, pay attention, make sure everything looks as good as possible. And they also, they almost serve as, I don't want to like inflate architectural photography's head too much, but they also, in many cases, they can serve as historical record. So if there's a landmark project or something and, you only get one shot to photograph it, and 100 years from now, you don't know, someone could be looking back at that historical home or building or whatever it was, and they might want to see the construction process or the finished product. We want to make sure that we're being accurate and representing the size of the space and the make sure the house isn't leaning over in the photos and make sure the colors are accurate. But there's a lot more detail and planning and prep that goes into the architectural side of things.
I mean, we're 10 years on here, and I do look at the work that you do with these high price houses. That's what I'm trying to work out. Is that architecture or is that real estate? Because you're not doing real estate in the sort of, as we've talked about before, in the gig economy way. You're not piling it high, selling it cheap, getting out to do as many as you can a day. But you are still effectively doing some real estate, aren't you?
Yeah, well, and there is a growing sort of segment of, especially in Los Angeles or London or Hong Kong, and these crazy expensive cities where there's $80 million on the line for a state-of-the-art architectural home.
Yeah.
They don't mind paying the architectural prices to get it photographed because the payoff when they do sell it is definitely worth it. So yeah, I still do, it technically would be real estate photography, but I'm shooting it exactly the same as I would if it were an architectural project. And the strange thing is, like, not strange, but the cool thing is, on a lot of these spec homes, I might be hired by the developer because at the end of the day, they're the ones who want to sell it. They want to get the money back. But then I can also sell photos to the architect, to the contractors, to the interior designer, you name it. So it is a real estate photography becoming architectural photography at this point in the market where it can support that. So
I'm interested in how the copyright works, actually, because if you've been in a house that somebody else is now living in, but it's great portfolio stuff, and it's, as you say, historically relevant as well in some of these places. Yeah. Are you able to show that, or is there great privacy clauses on this? It usually depends on the homeowner if they're open to it or not. Some people that you wouldn't expect to care a great deal about their home not getting out there, and some people love to have their stuff shared, and they see it as sort of like their contribution to the art world if the house is interesting enough. So it really kind of depends on a person's outlook, especially in LA. It gets weird because people think that like their house is going to get cased or the paparazzi is going to get a hold of the pictures or something. Yeah. So it's just a case by case kind of thing. In terms of skill set, it's a specialized area, Mike. It's all about angles, horizons, verticals. I mean, you just mentioned that a moment ago. And it's not something you can learn easily at night school. Do the pros keep it as a dark art?
Yeah, and that's something that I struggled with when I first started out. But I credit the internet at large really for mentoring me. I never assisted anyone. I just jumped right in, and it was crazy to think about it that way. I didn't know. I had no idea what I was doing. I knew keep the vertical line straight, and that's it pretty much, and add lights where it's dark.
Yeah.
And I just sort of made it up as I went. But I think that is an awesome thing because it helps you develop your own style. I wasn't really learning how someone else did it. I just did it the way I thought looked cool. And that was that. So it was a very simple, straightforward kind of organic approach to learning how to do it, I guess.
I saw a great film about you shooting these high-end homes. The kit you take, Mike, needs a low loader. I mean, how much time do you have to spend at a home? You take a lot of kit out.
Yeah, well, I used to travel with a ton of equipment. I would check 7 bags, and I'd have stands and lights and more lights and gels and tripods, and then I actually had a mild herniation in my L5S1 lumbar vertebrae when I was snowboarding, and that just got worse and worse and worse over the past 10 years. And so as the injury got worse, the amount of gear I was schlepping sort of tapered off because all I cared about was not having to lug this stuff all over the world. And so I have come up with a method that is, I've gotten to the point where I can tell my clients, this is not the best time of day. We're going to wait. And what's going on in my head there is I am going to wait for the light to get better so that I don't need to bring 7 lights out to make this look good. I can wait for the sun to be in the right spot and we'll just shoot it then. And the clients, they're like, okay, sounds great. Whereas before I would be like, all right, we're going to make this happen right now. We're going to get all the lights out. We're going to put the umbrellas over here and the soft boxes here and this and that. And it's both are a valid approach, but I just didn't want to carry anything. So I've got it down to, I have 3 lenses, 17, a 24, and a 50 tilt shifts, and 2 cameras, some iPads to tether with, and I only travel with 1 light now and 2 tripods. So it all fits in one Wow. One bag. Yeah.
What light is that? Is it a strobe or
yeah,
constant
it's a Profoto B10.
Okay. So wow, that really, I mean, that from the film I'd seen where you had all that equipment with you now cut it right down to putting it in the trunk of a car.
Oh, and don't get me wrong, like there are times where I'm backed into a corner and I'm like, oh God, like I wish I had, multiple lights here. But there's 99% of the time I can, sort of shoot my way out of a corner, if you will.
What's a typical commission day for you then?
So like a local job, I mean, I will generally, it depends on the time of year. If it's the summer and the sun's not setting until 9:30 p.m., we'll probably show up at, maybe 10, 11 in the morning and we'll work through sunset. But usually if it's an easy local job, we'll show up early, we'll scout it, we'll get a feeling for the project, and we'll get cracking. It's probably a 10 to 12 hour day. In the winter, I love shooting in the winter because the sun comes up a little bit later, it goes down really early, you can be home in time for dinner. But it's me and my assistant, and right now it's so weird with COVID and everyone is sort of, like hands off, and some people trust us to do our own thing, and that's great. And some people, they still want to bring art direction, and we're all kind of struggling to like figure out how to do this with masks on and social distancing precautions and all that. So it can get a little weird. But it's usually about a 12-hour affair, 20 pictures if we're really cranking. Yeah. On a long summer day, you can probably do, if there's no client there, like 30, but that's pushing it for sure. On a winter day, you might get, like I said, 15, 20, and it's a bit easier. I used to be slower. I've gotten quicker.
Herman Miller, Tesla, BBC, National Geo, clients, publications, they sing very loudly. They say, well, to me, they say arrived as one word. When did it start? When did it start to happen? When you were shooting real estate and then it suddenly started to turn for you, didn't it?
It was 2013 or 14. I kept a part-time job. I used to edit paparazzi photos 2 days a week, Friday night, Saturday night. I would literally be the guy at the computer editing the pictures, sending them off to the Sun or whatever. Honestly, UK tabloids, you guys, you're the worst with your gossip. I would be sending you.
We do like celeb stories, that's for sure.
Like Ashton Kutcher makes that with so-and-so. And I would be negotiating the rates.
So hang on a minute. So the paps were taking the picture. They were sending them to you. You were doing the edit and then making the business transaction.
Yeah. So when I first moved to LA, I had, like I said, no clients, no nothing. I needed some source of income. So I found a Craigslist posting that said, we need someone who can edit photos. I'm like, I can edit photos, and someone who knows Lightroom and Aperture and all that. So remember Apple Aperture from like 10 years ago? So I applied, I got the job. It was news. It was light edits, contrast saturation, and then like batch exporting. And I would put them in a folder and I would say, Britney Spears does X, or Dick Van Dyke is in Malibu, or someone flies in from LAX. And every now and then we get some crazy scoop, and the phone would start ringing. And of course, I'm the only one in the office. And I would license these photos to places all over the world, whether it was Australia, America, New Zealand, Canada. And the more gossipy it was, the more activity I had. So yeah, I sort of learned about licensing and, file management from that job, which was great. But it was when I quit that job, when I finally had enough income to not have to worry about making extra money. And I think that was, I want to say 2013, 14. I can't remember. I had that job for about 2.5 years, and it was really, it happened quick, it sort of just snowballed. It was like all the sort of pieces had been there. I've always been of the mind that if you can just get a couple of consistent clients, that's all you really need. And here we are. And I mean, the clients have gotten better and the dollar amounts have increased, but I still keep it simple. Just got a handful of clients that have, really got my back. And I have clients that, they'll come once a year. Well, they use me once, but it's, a solid base of clients. And it took me a few years to get that. But once I did, I was like, all right, I think I got this. I trust them. They like me. I like them. They keep hiring me. I don't think that's going to change, barring apocalypse. So I just kind of made the jump. And once you make the jump to full time, like you really light a fire under your ass to make sure that the money keeps coming in.
I do notice a fair amount of your work seems to involve using people. For scale, I guess, or is that for other reasons too? You like to sort of place people within your pictures.
I use people for a little drama every now and then. Like I'll put one person in there. But at the end of the day, I feel like I photograph architecture. Maybe there's a couple people in it. That's about all I really do. I'm jumping ahead here, but I feel like I've designed the career for my personality. I don't want to say I'm heavily introverted, but I'm not exactly like the partying type. I keep my sets nice and quiet and sort of contemplative, and I think my photos sort of reflect that.
Back with Mike Kelly for part 2 of his story in a moment, where we go travelling. Well, he goes travelling, and he also gets very secret about something at NASA. If you've wondered what happens in the More editions over on our very own Patreon channel, well, yesterday you got a free pass for one edition in which we talked about nude photography, objectification, and the strange tale of a bouncer I knew called Scarface in the infamous Wormwood Scrubs prison in London. I'll leave a link so you can go take a listen and join in with the conversation hopefully too. And remember our friends at Studio Ninja, the studio management software people, well, they still have an offer for Photography Daily professional photographers who want to organise their business as we step out into the work world once more. If that's you, you can control your diary, improve your workflow, connect your address book with invoicing and e-sign contracts, and you get 50% off your first year of use of this software by entering the code PHOTODAILY50 when you go to studioninja.co. Right, let's get back to Mike Kelly. You have a passion for buildings, clearly, that reach into the sky, and likewise you have a passion for stuff that flies through the sky as well. Why the fascination for aviation? Where does that come from?
I mean, I've always loved airplanes. Growing up, I was fascinated. I don't know why. I just think it's a little boy thing that I never grew out of. Some people pick cars, some people pick trains. I picked airplanes. It's funny, like I can see across my office the like one of my airplane photos, and I'm talking like to you and it at the same time. But yeah, I always, I love travel. I as soon as I was old enough, I got out of my hometown. Obviously, airplanes are a great means to an end when it comes to travel. And I think it is an absolute miracle that we have mastered aviation the way we have. And so, photographing it, I always think you got to photograph something that's fun. And not that architecture can't be fun, but it's not exactly relaxing when you've got 3 clients breathing down your neck trying to make a photo of a building, and it can be very stressful. So aviation photography was sort of my stress relief. And I would just kind of go to LAX and watch airplanes for fun, and people thought I was crazy. And I am a little bit, but it's a great, sort of foil to the architecture stuff.
And there's some amazing stuff. Air portraits, I thought was a really good idea. Wonderful project. It looks to me like you've photograph lots of planes and then just comped in the sky, but it's not that, is it? You set your camera up and you photograph across sometimes as many as 16 hours the planes arriving at the airport. Take me through that.
So the Air Portrait series is basically visualizing a day's worth of air traffic in one location. So how that will work is I will find a spot. I might scout the airport for a day or two to find the right location, and set up a tripod there. And every single time a plane lands or takes off, I'll take a photograph of it, or a series of photographs of it. And I'll end the day with 1,000 or 2,000 images and go back to the computer and spend a week or a month or more or however long amassing these composite image of hundreds of airplanes taking off or landing or doing whatever it is that they do. Because it's impossible to visualize how incredible an airport is when you drive past it or when you just look at one plane at a time. But the sheer amount of air traffic that passes through is sort of hidden by the way everything is so separate and how quickly the planes move. You can't really tell. So by visualizing all of it in one photograph, you get a very different view of how actually busy our skies are, even though that the vastness of the sky is just incredible. You condense it all into one photo, and it's really this sort of astounding visual.
Well, especially LAX. It's one of the busiest airports in the world, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I did LAX and Heathrow. I think Heathrow is 1 or 2 and LAX is 2 or 3 at any given time. And they all trying to trade with like Atlanta and Beijing or something, just depending on how you measure it. Every airport says they're the busiest one. But yeah, so the LAX image was the original. That was the first one that sort of set the whole thing off. And that was just a very casual I sort of just saw a clear sky and I was like, oh, I've kind of had this idea kicking around in my head. I want to go try this out. And I literally just rolled up with a Canon 60 and the 50 millimeter, the 1.8, like the cheapest 50 that Canon makes. And it was supposed to be a proof of concept. And I did it for an hour and I started kind of using the scroll wheel on the back of the camera. Like, this looks amazing. I'm gonna hang in there all day. So I ended up sitting out there for 8 hours from 10 in the morning until sunset and just took a shot every time the plane took off. And then I was so inspired. I came home and immediately worked on that until almost 6 in the morning the next day. And I was like, this is so cool. And the internet got a hold of it. And it was like shot out of a cannon levels of virality.
I know that the money you made from that picture led you to flying around the world and doing it in 20 or so airports more. So from that small start with the 60 and cheapy 50 millimeter lens, a dynasty in terms of project was born, really, Mike. Did it happen pretty much straight away?
The sort of around the world part of it was, I want to say, a year and a half after the original image. That one sort of got out on its own, and I was like, this is bigger than one picture. Yeah. After seeing it just go and go and go for 3 months, I was on Good Morning America, which is like a huge TV show here. Yeah. So I was on, I was on Japanese television. It was crazy how this thing kept going, and I was like, all right, there's more to this than just one photo. So then I kind of just planned on going just to all of my favorite airports and all of my favorite countries and just let it rip. And I traveled for 2 or 3 months. It was a crazy experience. It took me, I want to say, a year and a half, 2 years to edit all of them. I wasn't editing them every single day.
It is proof, though, isn't it, that if you have a really good idea, just get stuck into that project. I mean, you started with a 60 and the cheap 50 millimeter lens, and you continued to use it as you went around the world.
Yeah, it just keeps going. It's like the gift that keeps on giving, honestly. Yeah. It's in museums, and like every year something crazy happens with it. It seems it was so long ago, but it was not long ago at all. What I think's happened is now that the whole COVID pandemic has hit, it's become even more popular. It's like the story was written years ago, for this project, because half the airplanes in those photos aren't flying anymore. All of the interesting 747s and A380s and the old airplanes that sort of make up this varied tapestry in those photographs just don't exist. No. And a lot of the airlines, you can't see half the airlines in the photos at a given airport anymore, just because traffic has nearly ground to a halt in some cases. So it's kind of a snapshot of like the peak of aviation.
In terms of projects, I guess as photographers, we're very curious. And the ultimate curiosity project for me is classified, when you went to the NASA facility. Now, actually, the truth of this is that anybody could walk into that NASA facility and make pictures of whatever they wanted. You called it classified, and I thought it was really clever because you obscured parts of the images. Now, the first time I visited your site and saw classified, I'll be honest, I didn't read properly the blurb that came with it. And I thought, Mike had obviously all this access, and obviously they had to check the photos and just blur out the stuff or pixelate out the stuff that wasn't supposed to. But it wasn't that at all, was it? It was a really clever statement that you were making.
Yeah, that was honestly, that was one of those series that I thought I got invited down to the NASA Michaud facility in New Orleans. And that's where they built the solid rocket boosters and the main engine for the space shuttle. And it's a facility with an amazing history. And I won this sort of, like application contest thing. NASA put out a photo call and they said, we're going to invite 5 or 7 people or whatever to come down and photograph this facility and get a behind the scenes tour. And I was like, awesome, I'm going to throw my name in the hat. And they invited me down. And, on one hand, it was incredible to just see all of it. But on the other hand, it was a sort of red taped, get on the bus, get off the bus, here's your stop, you have 10 minutes here, take some photos, come back. And I was like, this is an amazing experience and not a lot of people get to do it. But photographically speaking, I didn't really have any time to think of something beyond the surface level. Because like I said, there's 7 other people who were all taking the same pictures of the same subjects. And I'm like, what could I possibly do? But the day before we got there, they were giving us this whole sort of like video introduction thing. Some of this stuff is classified and we might not be able to point the camera at it. And, they gave us this whole sort of thing about how the Russians had stolen the technology, or the Chinese or the Indians. And there was a slideshow of like, here's our NASA intellectual property. And then 5 years later, look what the Indians came up with. And it is the exact same thing. Or the China space program or something. Yeah. And so there was this copying that was going on. And I'm like, I find that in a way more interesting than the tour itself. And I was fascinated. And so I took all these photos, and I didn't know what I was shooting. I was like, oh, that's cool, I'll take a shot of that, that's cool. And I came home and I'm like, I gotta deliver something, because they're like, you can't just go to NASA and then sit on the photos for the rest of your life. You have to do something with it, because everyone saw you go there and they're like, what do you do at NASA? What'd you do? And so I was like, I just don't know. And I saw other people releasing their photos, and I'm like, I have that photo, I've got the same photo. And so I kept thinking about this whole amount of theft and stuff that was going on, and I was like, I'm gonna try to add some mystery. And it just came to me like in a flash, and I was like, I'm just gonna start censoring random things in these pictures. Yeah. And I think it makes it a lot more interesting.
It does.
Because it takes something that is fairly obvious and turns it into a little bit of like a guessing game. And it's like, did he have to censor that? Or was it just a thing that, he chose to? But like it's very interesting, because you've got these great leading lines, or you've got this whole facility set up to assemble this rocket, and you've got this really wide angle shot, and then you see like 10 pixels that are censored, and you're like, what's going on down there?
Well, I was squinting. I was thinking, well, if I squint, surely I should be able to make out some of these shapes. So you got me.
Yeah, and so I got a lot of great feedback on it. It is one of my favorite projects. It did not get the press that I thought it would. Maybe that's my sleeper sort of indie hit. It just hasn't hit yet.
Just waiting to happen. Do you know, this opportunity to talk with you about your work in LA as a very established and respected architectural photographer, mixed with the airport traits, that quite by chance, it's a wonderful story in virtue of a kit set up that at the most comes to a couple $1,000. And it's one I just didn't want to pass up, Mike, because I know those airport traits very well, but I know that your story is possibly about to change as well. And that interests me in a time where many photographers are reevaluating or thinking about their working lives. You have all these great creative skills, but like a lot of photographers, even those established in a genre, like yourself, many of us are asking this sort of 5-worded question. Where do I go next? And I think you are, aren't you?
I'm kind of at, I feel like I had this back surgery for that herniated disc I told you about in January of last year. And then the pandemic hit, and I really didn't work for like 6 months. And I'm kind of at a like career crossroads or something. And I'm trying to evaluate what my next big move is. I feel like I've had enough with the travel, if I'm totally honest. 2019, I flew 190,000 miles in the air.
Wow.
Just pinballing all over the world. Yeah. And I think I got it out of my system. I don't know what the next move is. I love, the local architecture gigs when I can wake up and shoot some incredible home and be back in my bed that night. Mm. The irony of all this is that I don't know if you guys are able to travel at all over there, but in America, it's kind of a free-for-all. So traveling right now is the best it has ever been. And it's crazy to say that, but the planes are an eighth full. Wow. The airports are empty. So if you have to travel, it's a completely different experience. Wow. And it's so surreal over here. But yeah, I kind of feel like, maybe it's studio photography, maybe it's still life, maybe it's product photography. I've got beautiful architecture here in California. I think the more I traveled, the more I came to appreciate how good we actually have it here in California with the homegrown architecture. It's some of the best in the world. I feel like airplanes, I still love airplanes to death, but my journey of photographing them, I don't know. I think it's always going to be different post-pandemic because, like I said, the reason that I really loved it, you had all these interesting planes. You had the 747s and the A380s. It was like a real arms race to make the coolest plane. And then that all just ground to a halt between the financial crisis and COVID. So now, like I said, it's been value engineered to kingdom come. So I don't know if I have a huge interest in that. I still admit it's an incredible miracle of flight. I'd love to work for some airlines to do, cabin interior photos or airport type of photos. But I feel lucky that I got my project in when I did. The other thing is I just projects, they come to me. It's like I get hit like a lightning bolt. And some people say you can't sit around waiting for projects to hit you. But every great project I've had has struck me and I've just acted on it like on impulse, like the air portraits thing, or the still lives, or even classified. I didn't know what I was doing until I took the photos, and then it all came together.
My thanks to Mike Kelly. And that's it for today. Keep sending your questions or feedback to studio@photographydaily.show so that I can feature you in the mailbag edition, which is, of course, the Friday photo walk. Remember, you can also send in pictures from your own photo walks to appear on the episode's show page online. On Monday, I talked with a photographer called Roy. With no training, he left a mechanic's job and took a real leap of faith when he photographed a small plastic figure. Friends might have wondered what on earth he was doing. Now he has large commercial clients and has been represented by the Saatchi Gallery.
I had my dad in one ear saying, "You've got to get a job."
Yeah.
I'd also just got my first mortgage, and so he's saying, "You've got to get a job, you've got to get a job." And I'm like, well, I started selling these bits on eBay. What if I'm onto something here?
How life changed for the man behind Roy's People, Monday. Music in the show was from artlist.io. For me, they bring the texture and the professional flavour to this programme. So if you make films, slideshows or podcasts, you can, like we do, subscribe to their service. And if you do that from the menu on our website, well, they send us a little love in return. I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.